Anyone brave enough just to give your own other mic? Okay. Anyone? The Jeopardy music. Bum, 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 bum. Nobody knows what justice means? To be fair. Yasko says to be right, to be fair. Anyone else? If something is just, what is it? Correct? Right? Okay. I want to get your minds thinking. I want to get the cogwheels and the cobwebs to be cleaned out of your brain for this evening, for us to be really open and learning tonight. So we're going to bring a little excerpt from the Spirit's book, chapter 11. It's the law of justice, love, and charity. Specifically, questions 873 through 876 do discuss this idea of justice. Just as an FYI, if anyone's curious, want to read a little bit more, Spirit's book, part 3, pretty awesome and amazing. Question 875, how may justice be defined? Justice consists in respecting the rights of others. What determines these rights? Ooh, that's a good question. What determines these rights? If justice consists of respecting the rights of others, who determines those rights? Anyone have an idea? Our conscience, okay. The need to love nature, law, okay. Let's see what it says. They're determined by two things, human law and natural law. So Aloysio, you were very close. Since humans have established laws that are appropriate for their customs and character, such laws have established rights that can vary with progress. Therefore, the rights of humans do not always conform to justice. They only regulate certain social relations, while in private life, there's an infinity of acts that are the exclusive jurisdiction of the court of conscience, which is what Antonia, I knew your name, I knew it, was referencing. So yes, it is determined by human law and natural law, although we may observe that there are certain human laws that break the rights of others. There are numerous ones we could name. Abortion is one of them because we are violating the rights of the incarnating spirit. That's a topic for a whole other day. But just for us to reflect on what the Spirit's book is bringing to us to understand at a more profound level what justice means. Furthermore, oh, and by the way, this is not the entire answer. I just shortened it. Believe it or not, it's actually a lot longer. I just tried to compress it because the answers are really long, so you can read more about it in questions 873 to 876. And this was from question 8, the answer, sorry about that, answer to question 876. The criterion of true justice is, in fact, to desire for others what we would desire for ourselves, not to desire for ourselves what we would desire for others, which is not the same thing. Let's read that again, because that's a little tongue twister there. The criterion of true justice is to desire for others what we desire for ourselves. So if I desire happiness, I desire it for you too. And not to desire for others what we would, not to desire for ourselves what we would desire for others, which is not the same thing. So does everyone get that? That's a biggie. That's a big one for us to reflect upon. Because in as much as you want to be happy, we should wish that of the same person. Right? Since it is not natural to desire our own harm, then if we take our personal desire as the norm or starting point, we can be certain that we will never do anything for our neighbor except what is good in all ages and in all belief systems. humans have always sought to enforce their own personal rights. The sublimity of the Christian religion was to take personal rights as the basis for the rights of the neighbor. So just again, reinforcing this idea of what justice is. It's doing good to your neighbor. It is wanting for others, wanting good for yourself and wanting the same for others as well. So just so we have a more deepened perspective, from a Spiritist perspective, what justice is truly all about. But now we're going to dive into what the actual text of the book that Joanna talks about. This is chapter 7 of the book, Jesus in Our Days. This is the Psychological Series, Volume 1. She has various books out that have been translated into English that you can find online. So she begins to talk about Jesus and justice and the aim and purpose. The aim of justice is to repair any damage caused by wrongdoers and to rehabilitate them, making them useful to society. Why is it important for us to recognize in our society, because obviously knowing and understanding the law of society, we have to live in a society. It is part of our evolutionary development that we live amongst one another. We don't live in caves alone by ourselves or up in the mountains by ourselves. It's not exactly healthy. Our purpose is to be in a society. But why is it important for us to know that the purpose and the aim of justice is to repair any damage caused by wrongdoers and to rehabilitate them, making them useful to society? We're talking about those that are going to jail, those that serve time, those that are, are being, what's the word? I can't think of the word. It's completely flowing out of my head. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just brain fog. I think it's, not overcross. They pass the boundaries of what is allowed within the law. I think that's the word I was looking for. So why is it important for us to know that we're living within a society? Why is it important that we have that in our society? Because, if we think about our jail system today, it's not exactly how it works, right? Not exactly rehabilitating them exactly. Supposed to. So this is the ideal that Joanna is wanting us to look at, aim for, and express to society, that is the purpose. That when we look at quote-unquote criminals, because we're all criminals in some way, not in this life, perhaps in 10 lifetimes ago or 20 lifetimes ago or 50 lifetimes ago, we did something wrong at some point. So we believe here she's trying to show here that there is no punishment in God's eyes. It's all about re-education, learning, again, to love others. It's not about, you're a bad person, you should go to HEL double hockey sticks. You go to that bad place. It's not about that. I think that's the beauty of her message, that she starts out and she wants us to know from the get-go, from the first sentence, that justice is not about punishment. It is about education. Because when we err, it's because we lack the understanding of these divine laws or these human laws. Most of the time we understand the human laws. It's the divine laws that we don't quite grasp altogether. Justice works on education's behalf using disciplinary measures that include limiting criminals' freedom in order to save them and the community from greater wrongs. I remember we had a conversation with Haroldo Dutra Dias. He's a lawyer in Brazil, judge, lawyer. And actually, Daniel had asked him a question years ago, like how he felt about, because he had to deal at one point with really severe cases of like murder. I forget what they call that. It's not civil cases. It's criminal cases where he was dealing with murderers and other kinds of criminals. So, and Daniel had asked him, well, how do you feel putting these people away? Like, isn't it, you feel bad? Like, this person's obviously sick in the mind. And he said, and he turned to us and he said, you know what? It is the best place for them that they can be, because they can stop and think, hopefully, about their lives and meditate, and we are protecting the rest of society from them and protecting them from themselves, from committing more crimes, from committing greater wrongs. So here she's just letting us know that it's not wrong to have a system in place where we segregate, in a sense, or bring into a rehab style, supposed to be, jail, that it's okay. It's not, we are not horrible human beings for doing that. But what she is reminding us, yes, yet again, that education is what's most important, and disciplinary measures, and limiting criminals' freedom in order to save them and the community from greater wrongs. So again, we're not exactly seeing this in our modern day society yet, but hopefully this is the aim moving forward. A lot of changes are going on. A lot of modifications are are happening. Even at the smaller, lower levels, I think just, and this is very minute and this is very small, it's not in comparison to criminal activity, but in some school systems now, instead of having children go to detention and just sit in a room for like an hour doing nothing, or maybe reading a book, most of the time they just sit there and do nothing, and there's a teacher there and they just sit there, it's called detention. You may have had one or two, or I don't know if when you grew up that existed. I don't know. It existed in my time. But nowadays what they do is they implement meditation. So instead of detention, they're having kids meditate. And so to learn, because a lot of times these children can eventually grow up to break further laws, not just breaking the small laws of the school, but teaching them mindfulness, to be present in the moment, to let go of their anger, their frustration, and to rewire their brain. So in little ways, our society is changing little by little, and the importance of emotional intelligence has come to become more of a topic of discussion nowadays in mainstream news media, like the New York Times and the New York Magazine and so forth and so on. Joanna goes on to say, a crime results from disregard for established codes of law that govern peoples, providing individuals with equal rights and responsibilities. Let's read it again. A crime results from disregard for established codes of law that govern peoples, providing individuals with equal rights and responsibilities. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. When we break a law from the established codes, which are the laws, it's a disregard for it. I think it's pretty simple when she explains there. But she goes on to say, whenever justice is corrupt, individuals act foolishly, and the abuse of authority leads to the extremes of wantonness. In a just society, all enjoy equal opportunities for progress due to an equal distribution of wealth. The strong help the weak, the healthy assist the unhealthy, the young help the elderly. Natural behavior resulting from a clear awareness of responsibility, which establishes happiness as a consequence of solidarity amongst diverse individuals. Again, she speaks of this utopian society that we don't quite see yet. In certain cultures, such as the Asian culture, I want to say maybe it's Japanese, maybe Chinese, forgive me if I'm not correct, but they revere the elderly and they take care of the elderly and they take them into their homes. Like here in the US, it's very common to put the elderly into nursing homes. It's culturally normal. But in other cultures, that is abnormal and it's unaccepted. So we're kind of getting there to viewing, at least in terms of our elders, and the rest, the strong helping the weak, the healthy assisting the unhealthy. We are seeing those things in small circumstances across the globe. And just recently, I was lucky enough to, one of our SSB members, Dione, had let me know that there was a free yoga class in our local library. And so we were thinking about, wow, how wonderful this instructor, this person, gives these lessons for free for the local community. It's a charity that this person, he's doing for the local community, because he could charge, and of course he does have a job, other places where he does charge, but he's giving back to the community. So we see little drops of help here and there sometimes more, sometimes a little less, but it's there. The seeds are there. They're happening. And people like Dione that are encouraging others to do such things are helping in this formation of a better world, because we are looking for something that is balancing and a spiritual practice. She goes on to say, as people develop their sentiments and intelligence, their laws become gentler and their justice more equitable. As people develop their sentiments and intelligence, their laws become gentler and their justice more equitable. In primitive cultures, the law of the strongest prevails, replaced later with the absurd condition of heredity, until more elevated socio-democratic principles are reached, where personal responsibility takes priority in the freedom of the members. We can look back in 14th and 16th and 17th century in different cultures where if you're born from a king, you're a prince, and that just makes you royalty. But we see nowadays that the king and queens, even in England, aren't as what they used to be. Now we have prime ministers, we have other laws in place, so things have changed from old times. When we're talking about when she says the law of the strongest, she could be referencing the time of the what are they called? Medieval times, the Vikings. Words are not coming to me today for some reason. So their law was the law of the strongest. The Vikings, which they're actually really called Norse people, and so I forget why we refer to them as Vikings. I think that's the actual act of what they're doing, but they're actually called Norse people. So they would go around and do lots of not so good things, and steal land and women, and by force and by killing. But nowadays, we don't have that. Thank God. We're more evolved. We don't see that, although we still see some backwardness in our society still. Joanna goes on to say, however, the road is still long before respect for life, one's neighbor, nature, and unarbitrary, non-punitive justice is reached. The road is still long before respect for life, one's neighbor, nature, and unarbitrary, non-punitive justice is reached. And I think we all can feel that and know that it's slowly coming together, but we have a long way to go still before basic human rights are respected across the globe. We know that there's still human trafficking, there's still enslavement, there's still many other subhuman or non-human or unhuman acts that are happening in this world. Maybe not in the US because it's considered a first world, but in other places these acts are happening. And it's, it's not the ideal. I think Joanna is, again, like all of her other chapters, she's setting up an ideal for us to work towards and giving us a frame, a frame to work off of, a sort of a backbone to work off of as how we should work and help society reach these goals. And you might think to yourself, well, I'm one person. I'm just one person. Like, how can I stop enslavement, or how can I stop human trafficking? Like, I'm one person. It's amazing what one person can do. Even if it's just being mindful of your neighbors around you in your neighborhood, being mindful of putting your trash in the correct location, saying hello and be kind to your neighbor when you walk outside and you're walking your dog or your cat. I don't know, cats don't go for walks, never mind. Don't have pets, obviously. So when you're just going outside, and obviously you might encounter neighbors. Sometimes we live very far. Our houses are quite far, a distance from one another, and perhaps maybe you don't see people every day. Maybe you only see them when you go to like the supermarket. But those are the opportunities when we are interacting with one another that we can show charity. It's something small, but you don't know what people are enduring day in and day out. The incidence of depression and attempted suicide in this country alone is astounding. And oftentimes they're in people who seemingly look normal, quote unquote normal, whatever that's supposed to mean. They look happy, they look like they have money, or maybe not, or they seem like everything's great. But underneath that, there's a lot of suffering and loneliness. That's why it's always good for us to be kind to strangers, kind to one another, and not just kind to your strangers. As Christians, we're taught to be good to our neighbor. And I don't know if it's emphasized enough that it's very important for us to be good to our own family, our cousins, that one uncle who's really annoying, that aunt or that sibling that you can't stand, that one who, did you wrong so many times. Merely by working in our own family dynamics, we are helping the whole of society move forward, because the family is a cell of society that Joanna has again and again told us about. So if we, at the very least, just try to do our best to be the best we can be within our family dynamic, within our family circle, that's the best we can give. Because if everybody does that actively, consciously, imagine it's going to lift up the world and the energy, because we actually are caring. We're forgiving our brother who may have stolen $50 from us when we were 13 or something. People hold on to these things for years, for decades. It's amazing what we hold on to for decades, and we don't forgive and we don't let go. So it's important for us to work on those things and not think about things in this grand scheme of, I don't have thousands of dollars, I can't fly to Africa, I can't do this, I can't do that. No, don't think about that. Just think about what little things you can do in your own family circle. I'm sure Dione had no idea how monumental telling me about yoga has been recently in my life. Monumental. So we never know what our small, imperceptible, seemingly unimportant act of goodness can have a ripple effect in somebody's life, in the lives of many people. Because now that I feel better, I'm going to make someone else feel better, and so on, and so on, and so on. Yes. Yes. But that's why we should focus on the good as much as we can. Because in the same way as Yaska was just mentioning, when it comes to things that are bad or quote-unquote evil, if you want to call it that, they have a domino effect as well. One bad thing can lead to another bad thing, to another bad thing, if we don't stop that cycle. That's why it's important for us to work on our family unit as a basis, as a starting point for us. Then, of course, as usual, in all the chapters, she always brings the perspective of Jesus. She brings him as the model, as the guide, and uses his life for us to reflect upon, for us to think about and see how we can try, in turn, implementing, even in small, minuscule amounts in our lives, how he behaved in life. She says, Jesus was the champion of equitable justice. His attitude toward people was always the same: benevolence with the aim of education. Probably if we brought in a few criminals randomly, we might not be able to have that benevolent attitude at first or at all. But this is the aim, is that to recognize, especially as spiritists, that we live thousands of lifetimes, and God only knows what we've done before. I mean, we've probably done a lot of good, I'm sure, but probably we've done some things that weren't so great. So who are we to judge? Christ was always kind, benevolent, and loving, with the aim of education. Everything that he taught was the aim to teach. All the parables, every word that he breathed in his lifetime here on this planet was to educate, to uplift, to help others. There never was a moment in his existence on this planet that he didn't utilize his words to benefit others and for their education. Joanna goes on to say that he conceded to a meeting with Nicodemus, a doctor in the upper house of the Sanhedrin, as he did with Zacchaeus, a tax collector. He talked to Lazarus and his sisters in Bethany, as he did with a thief seeking his support on the cross. These were all people that were seen as bad, as criminals, as downcast or outcasts. They were not people to be, if you were good, if you were clean, you shouldn't mix with the unclean, quote unquote. But he did. He mixed with everyone. He didn't care what social stigmas were. This person, oh my gosh, they're a tax collector. I don't know what could be the equivalent of that today. Well, I wasn't specifically thinking about the tax, because we don't look at the IRS as bad people. I think we understand as a whole, as a society, that they're good. But I think there are other institutions or other aspects of our lives that we might look at and think, oh, they're bad. I don't want to be associated with those type of people. But Christ associated with everyone. Anyone who wanted to learn, to grow, he was there, educating. This is our model. So if we're looking if we're thinking about and reflecting about how should my behavior be around others, how should my behavior be around people who I know have crossed the line, have done wrong, there's your model. It's not me saying it. It's Joanna saying it. Repeating the life of Christ and how he lived. Now, are we going to be like Jesus? Probably not. But we can sure aim for it. What is that saying? Shoot for the moon, land amongst the stars. It's like at least you're shooting up high. At least you're setting your goals up high for yourself. Not saying that you are responsible for what your neighbor, how your neighbor treats the other neighbor, but I, myself, am the one to set the example. Let me be kind. So maybe that'll have an effect on others to also be kind. I witnessed recently in this class I took, a couple classes I've been taking recently at the local gym, and in this one particular class, people really don't talk to each other. No one really helped anyone else. So I noticed maybe I was just new and they all, knew each other. But this other class, it was amazing. It was I think it was body pump. Yes, body pump. And everyone was so helpful to me. People were coming up to me and saying, this is the way you do it. This is the correct way to optimize your exercise routine and do this and do that. I mean, all these women, I was like, wow, these people are great. This is like walking to a church and everyone's like, hi, how are you? How was your day? How was your week? And I was like, wow, gosh, I was so overwhelmed by people wanting to be my friend. So it's amazing what kindness, simple kindness can do for humanity. A simple hello during a class that you take at the local Y or the gym can really change people, at least for the day, and help them to get through it. She goes on to say, realizing that people differ due to their intellectual and moral achievements, he provided everyone with the same conditions, opportunities, and impartialities. I'm going to read that again. Realizing that people are different due to their intellectual or moral achievements. So some may be smarter intellectually, and some might be smarter in a moral sense. But he provided to everybody the same conditions, opportunities, and impartiality. So let us reflect on that. Realizing that people differ due to their intellectual and moral achievements. So he realized that not everyone was at the same level, but he still was fair to everyone, despite where they were coming from. She goes on to say, whether to the adulteress, the prostitute, the priests who interrogated him, the learned Sadducees, or the hypocritical Pharisees, he always granted the same treatment. So nowadays, we can sum that up into other people within society who are looked down upon. And despite that, Christ still always granted them the same treatment. He was always kind, always benevolent. When he scolded those who tried to catch him in their sophist, compromising snare, he was assertive without neglecting compassion, since he knew about their sickly soul from which all behavior proceeds. Does that make sense to everyone? He always, of course, he was Jesus. He could see into our souls and into our hearts. And he knew where we were at in our evolutionary journey. So he could have compassion and understanding. Now, granted, we all don't have that ability. Perhaps you do, and kudos to you, but probably the average person does not have the ability to look into someone's soul and see all that which is there. But even still, he proceeded the same, treated everyone the same. In an age of arbitrariness, he was magnanimous. Of power abuse, he spoke about renouncing arrogance and becoming humble. Of exploitation, he taught and lived benevolence. Every aspect of his life, again, was a moment of teaching and model for us. He proposed that our justice should not be the justice of the Pharisees, who, morally diseased, took advantage of the status quo by exploiting the weak, widows, and children. Let's read that again. He proposed that our justice should not be the justice of the Pharisees, who were morally diseased, took advantage of the status quo by exploiting the weak, widows, and children. I think at this point in our evolutionary state, we're not so bad. There are people within many different areas of life, politicians, in the healthcare system. There's fraud. There are perverse politicians, ones that are corrupt. But we have a lot of good ones as well in our society. So we can see both sides to that. She goes on to say, and when Pilate, who would wash his guilty hands, due to the cowardice of his character, declared that he has power and authority over him, Jesus stated that such power and authority had been granted, for even Pilate himself answered to a higher authority, since true power and perfect justice came from God alone. Fascinating. So there is this true higher power that does rain down perfect justice. So we may look at society and think, well, that's not fair, or that person's doing that. How can that be fair? We don't have to worry, because whether if it's human laws or the natural laws will bring about reconciliation. They have to reconcile with that which the law they transgressed. They have to pay back, in a sense, remedy what they did wrong. What's the saying? No good deed goes unpunished. So we all have to answer for everything that we do. Good, the bad, and the ugly. Hopefully there's more good. At least we're striving towards that. And I think it's the Gospel according to Spiritism. They have the chapter called The Good Spiritist. And it's just about, right, am I correct? Does anybody know that? Yeah, yes, okay. And it's just about being an average person, just being the best you can possibly be. God bless you. It's not about being something that is to the level of Marvel comic books, like the, what is it, Mr. America? No. Captain America. I mean, we don't have these powers, but what we don't realize is the little that we can do is very powerful. The little acts we can show, or the little acts of kindness that we can show towards others, are very impactful. And likewise, The little negative things that we do can also have a negative impact and a ripple effect, as Yaska was reminding us earlier, in the lives of others. So you may be irritated that particular day, and then you get irritated with someone at the supermarket, and then they get irritated with somebody else because they were irritated with you that you were irritated with them. So the cycle just continues on and on and on. Someone has to stop the cycle. So as cheesy as it sounds, or perhaps, again, I can't think of the other word, but as cheesy as it sounds, it starts with us. It really does. And we believe that this particular book, Joanna, is trying to utilize Christ's teachings as our model and guide, as a guide for our everyday lives, how we should handle situations, how we should deal with one another, whether we're blood relatives or not. It doesn't matter. From the Spiritist perspective, it does not matter. Because who's my brother today can be my neighbor tomorrow, and vice versa. So we never know. We always have to think about what our small action can do and what ripple effect it can have on others. Now, we are so fast-acting, quick thinkers, quick to react. Perhaps we don't always give thought to what we're doing. We're just kind of sort of unconsciously just going through life, not being conscious. If it's time for us to sort of wake up and have acts of kindness that we consciously do. I remember when I worked as a nurse for the night shift and 12-hour shifts. And in the morning, when it was time to leave, I'd get in my car, and then at some point I'd arrive home, and then I'd have no recollection of driving home at all. I had no recollection of how I got home, and it happened to me on several occasions, and it used to freak me out. Like, my brain waves were on some other wavelength. It was like on autopilot. And I just knew the way to get home, and I got there, and I got home, I was like, woo, I'm here. And sometimes that's how we live our lives. And that, woo, I'm here, is sometimes something bad that happens to us in our lives, something that wakes us up. Maybe it's an illness. Maybe it's a fight with someone you care about. Maybe someone crashed into your car. Maybe you broke your leg or something else. But everything is about calling our attention and bringing awareness to our immortal being, us as immortal beings. And recently I came across something that a friend was sharing in a group. This particular holistic psychiatrist, her name is Kelly Brogan, Brogan. She is a board-certified psychiatrist in the United States, but in the last few years, she has been practicing holistic psychiatry. She did practice allopathic psychiatry before this, but now she's talking a lot about, she learned from her own illness that she developed, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Don't ask me to explain what that is. You have to look it up. You have to Google it. It's an illness that came and went. But she said through that illness, she learned that illness is not just physical. It's way far and beyond just something physical. Or it's just the brain. My brain's messed up. It's something so much more beyond the physical. She talks a lot about, or refers to, or inspires spirituality, eating a proper diet, yoga, a lot of things that Leo was bringing, those alternative therapies that Leo was bringing in this particular book, Plenitude, talking about alternative therapies. She talks a lot about it. She has a website. You can Google her. It's really fascinating to see that there are many others out there like her who are thinking like that, who are looking to change the world one website at a time or one YouTube video at a time. It's something small. It's not monumental. She's probably never going to make it to Oprah. But in the community that she lives and works and breathes, she's helping. So that's the best she can do. That might not be, I'm not a physician, but I can do what I can do. And that's what we should reflect on and not think about all the things that we can't do for X amount of reasons. But think about what you can do, what you are capable of. some take-home thoughts that Joanna wants for us to reflect on, to remember, to take home. If you are entangled in your own errors and caught in the web of incomplete human justice, re-educate yourself. If you're entangled in your own mistakes, you're caught up in it, you're lost in it, re-educate yourself. What does that mean, to re-educate ourselves? Re-educate ourselves in what way? Go back to college? No. Re-educate ourselves in a spiritual, moral sense. Sidebar, if you want to go back to college, that's great. Nothing wrong with that. Just saying, I believe what she's referring to is the moral re-education. An overall understanding about basic human kindness and rights for others, because nobody commits an act that is bad because they know that it's bad. Deep down, there's something that's not quite right, that they are, as Joanna referred to earlier, as the sickly souls. They commit certain acts that are not right. And she says, if we find ourselves in these types of situations, re-educate yourself, learn, study. Just like this particular psychiatrist, she went from believing in allopathic medicine to believing in all sorts of alternative therapies that she never would have given any credit to before, she said, her own illness. So she re-educated herself on all that was out there, all the good that can come of alternative therapies, positive affirmations, anything that is good and noble in the world. She utilized it. The same for us. We're no different. Our issue might be different, might be more severe. You might say, well, my situation is extremely complicated, Kirsten. You have no idea. I probably don't have any idea. But God knows. Jesus knows. And your guardian angel knows. They know what you need. They're trying to whisper in your ear. So let us be open to hearing their suggestions by opening our hearts. If you are a victim of unfortunate circumstances weighing on you, how often have we ever felt that I'm a victim of circumstance? She says, trust in God and wait. That is so hard to do. It means having patience. Being patient and trusting the process. And that can be very hard to do when you are suffering in your own pain. But she simply says, trust in God and wait. She goes on to say, if you have been harmed and wrongly accused, do not despair. Trust in God and wait as well. It's very easy for us to fall into despair. If we experience something that's quite traumatic and fast, sometimes it's where we go. It's where our mind goes. We fall. Sometimes we don't even realize a lot about ourselves until we go through a traumatic event or an event that is very emotionally draining for us, to realize how easy it is for us to fall into despair and feel like there's a bottomless pit that's just dark and eternal. But Joanna tells us, don't go down that route. Don't despair. Stay encouraged. Trust in God and wait. She brings this interesting next sentence to sort of bring together all of this information. She says, pay now what you forgot to pay yesterday, certain that the failure of earthly laws will not keep divine justice from reaching you. And read that again. Pay now what we forgot to pay yesterday, certain that the failure of earthly laws will not keep divine justice from reaching you. So let's just say, in one lifetime, and we read a lot about these stories in the Andrea Louise collection, Life in the Spirit World, about people who commit murders in previous lives. And this is decades ago, where we didn't have modern forensic science as we do today, where fingerprinting and DNA didn't exist at that time. Well, it existed, we just didn't know it existed. So we didn't have the capability to find criminals like we do today. And I don't like the word criminal because I think it's so demeaning. Just people who do things, because they're not well. But we should never worry about that particular person who transgresses a law of God, because whether it's this life or the next, Joanna reminds us that divine justice, nothing will keep it. Oh, this is not working. Nothing will keep it from reaching you, from finding you. So no matter how hard we may try to run away from the consequences, it'll find us. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to suffer. Like, remember in the beginning, and she started out her chapter, that it's not about punishment. It's about education. It's about learning. So we shouldn't fear it or worry, well, gosh, I did something bad in the past, and that's why I'm going through this today. We shouldn't really have that perspective. We should think, well, maybe I made some decisions in the past that weren't the best, and now it's like I'm enrolled in a new program at the university. Perhaps you were in a different program previous years, and this year you're required to go through a more difficult program because you have to learn, and that's just what it is. And we have to destigmatize illness and things that are bad that happen to us or look down upon in society, and just say they're just experiences that we go through. That's it. This life is short. I'll never forget the greatest lesson of my life that I learned, and forgive me for bringing it, making this personal, was literally when my father was on his deathbed. And a few months before he died, he kept saying to me, I don't know if he said to anyone else, he kept saying how fast life had gone before him. He kept saying, man, my life went by so fast. It was like yesterday I was living in Brazil on the farm with my 15 brothers and sisters, and now here I am, dying, waiting to go back in an instant. He's like, it passed so fast. So that always stuck with me to remind us that for the good or the bad, things pass. Time moves on. Let's keep going, moving with it for the goodness of ourselves, and let's take every opportunity we have to do good. She goes on to say, it's better that you are repairing commitments that you do not remember than enjoying physical liberty while carrying a guilty conscience hidden in illusion. Sometimes it's better to be on the victim end of things than be the perpetrator, because the perpetrator is incurring more debt, whereas the victim is paying debt off. So it's a good perspective for us to have. And again, I use those terms, victim and perpetrator, loosely because our modern day language doesn't have a more empathetic or compassionate verbiage for me to utilize other than that, so forgive me. But that is what it is. So when we go through something that's horrific, that is harsh, that is difficult, let's give thanks to God that, you know what, I'm repairing commitments from the past. I'm going through a lesson right now. I'm learning something, because learning is painful. If you've ever been to college or grad school, nursing school, medical school, it's painful. It really is. It literally is painful. Because it's difficult, it's trying, it's stressful, it pushes you to limits you never knew you had. It's the same way in life. There's no different. True justice always finds the wrongdoer. I don't believe she says this to mean that, in a sinister way, like you can't hide from God, God's going to get you. I don't believe she's trying to say it like that. True justice always finds the wrongdoer. We will always have to answer for everything that we do. That's the way the laws work. It's the way the divine laws work. Part 3 of the Spirit's book. Read it, study it. It's about all the divine laws that exist. God created these laws, so it's a well-oiled machine that works for us, for each one of us. Luckily, God is so compassionate, and the laws are so beautifully made that it's not about an eye for an eye. Oftentimes, if we try to be the best person and be charitable and be kind and to work on ourselves, maybe I don't have to lose my eye. Maybe I'm just going to lose my fingernail. I remember decades ago when I was much younger, and a friend of a friend of a friend came to visit my parents. He had been in a horrible automobile accident. He lost his leg, and it had completely altered his life. He had been independent, living on his own, and now he went to being dependent, not living on his own, and he was miserable. So he had gone to see Divaldo Franco and watched his lecture and got the opportunity to ask him his feedback as to why he thought he lost his leg. And he said, and this is from a medium, Divaldo Franco, who a lot of us revere as someone who has a lot of knowledge and experience. And Divaldo turned to him and said, "You only lost your leg because you were supposed to lose your life. But because all the good you've done in this life, you only lost your leg." And he was stunned by that. And he told us later that he thought of himself as a good person. He did try to be good to his neighbor and was very friendly, was charitable, was kind. He was a very sweet person. He couldn't at first understand why this had happened to him. So it's a reminder, true justice always finds us. Meaning to say, one way or another, we have to learn what we need to learn. We can't run away from it. So it's best that we accept the lesson as we're going through it and take it and see and utilize it as a teacher. You can even begin reframing illnesses or circumstances and telling yourself that this is my teacher. What do I have to learn from this teacher in my life? How can I grow? She ends with, for your part, be just and equitable, to be fair, towards everyone, using as your model the behavior of Jesus, who never failed anyone. That's a high bar for us to try and reach, but that's the point. Reach for the moon, or land amongst the stars, some sort of phrase of saying like that. The point is just for us to aim high, do our best, try and follow this model. Try is the optimal word here, because we may try and fail, and that's okay. Just got to get back up again and try again, do it over. It might be hard the first couple of times or first couple hundred times, but eventually, the more we practice something, the better we get at it. Those are the thoughts that Joanna wants to leave us with today. And again, this is from her book, Jesus in Our Days. This book was recently translated to English, and this was chapter 7. And this is part of a series of lectures that we are doing from each chapter to chapter, learning about Jesus and how to best utilize him as our model and guide. We have a few minutes if anyone wants to make any comments or questions or comments about something that they'd liked or something that Joanna said that made them think, or something that was said today that made them think or reflect upon. We're open if anyone wants to say anything. If not, that's okay. We can move on to our passes. Okay, Yasko?
Yeah, it is very important topic. We tend in this society to pay more attention as a wrong-doing thing. When we have someone did actually something, they will say, well, did too much, shouldn't do it, etc. We never look at the other side, like you say, to the silence. When you expect a welcoming, how much that silence hurted us. And look at Jesus, all the journey with his disciples, all the encounters with all the ones that are in need, etc. I never saw him silencing, unless in very particular situation when he already the thing was so heated that he put some silence to cool down. There was a meaning, but he always had a voice, some kind of advice, something, story, parable to say. So I think we have to be aware that God used us as instrument, human, here in a human planet, to serve others, to answer to the prayer other people are doing to God. They have to use us. So if we don't pay attention, the service that we supposed to do in that moment, that you saw that person, for some reason, God made you aware that that person probably wasn't in a good shape, probably need a word. And you said, well, I don't want to mess up. It's not my business. No, it is our business, because we won't do this to our child, to our beloved, if we see some of our, beloved not to give a word. We may give too much, but we always have this willingness to help. Why not to a stranger, not totally strange, but a co-worker, someone that you were inspired to pay attention, So that kind of a quote-unquote wrongdoing, it passed without the human justice to catch. But the divine justice, as you say, because it's all in our conscience, we're never gonna let you go free, because it's in our conscience. When we go back, we say, why didn't I give a word to that person? Why didn't I? So how is she now? How is he now? Miserable? I could have stopped this cycle of, depression or whatever, anguish. So.
Thank you, Yasko. Very relevant. Anyone else make any comments or questions? Sure. Thank you, Maria.
The first quote about what is justice. Just want to say how I never thought about it. Sorry.
Here? Or
so
here?
Yeah, this one. Yeah. I never thought that justice was also to repair any damage caused to wrongdoer and rehabilitate them. I just thought that was really beautiful. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah. Joanna's amazing that way.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
I thought really justice was just to repair damage, not to help the wrongdoer.
Yep.
So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a reminder that Joanna brings to us, the compassion that God has for all of his children, for all of us, that he doesn't wish to punish. He wishes to educate for us to get better. The same way if we have a child or a loved one, we don't, let's say we have a loved one or a child that's doing something that's not good, but no matter what, we still want the best for them. We still see the best in them and help them see the best in themselves so they can be more productive in society. And if we as mother and fathers can see our children